All right, hey Nick here. I just want to get a good discussion going about punishment running or punishment exercises at softball practice for making mistakes, right? It's something that became very clear in some of our Instagram stories. I recently talked about what are some of the exercises that players hate, and a very large amount of players listed push-ups and burpees and sprinting and running poles and crunches and other exercises like that. And I had an idea in my head that was pretty much confirmed with the next question when I asked why they hated those exercises. And majority of everyone that gave the answers was we had to do them as punishment at practice. And that started to get me thinking a little bit more as to why are we doing burpees and why are we doing these push-ups at practice as a part of punishment, right? And a lot of them were like, for every error we make, we needed to do 10 push-ups, or for every run scored against us in a tournament, we had to do 10 burpees, right? And what happens is I mean, we can't, at the younger ages, I mean, isn't the goal to score runs and have more runs than the other team at the end of the game? That's the goal. I mean, you can't have a shutout every single game. And as coaches, we can't expect that, and you can't penalize and punish your team for giving up a run. I mean, that's literally the sport, is to score more runs than the other team at the end of the game. That's the goal, right? And what starts to happen, and then in terms of errors too, at the younger ages, I mean, we can't expect an error-free game. It just doesn't happen, right? And what happens as coaches is if we're expecting that from younger players and they're playing in fear because, man, like, I just made an error, my whole team has to do 10 burpees now, and they're going to hate me for it. Coach is mad at me, I made an error. I guarantee no player goes into the game being like, man, I can't wait to make 3 errors today. My team is so out of shape that we need to do 10 burpees, so I'm going to make a bad throw on purpose, right? No player does that, right? At least you hope that they're not. I doubt that they are, but it's just one of those things that becomes a very slippery slope, because now that player is singled out to the team. Everyone knows they made an error. I mean, you don't need to rub their nose in it. They know they made a mistake. Everyone watched them make a mistake. They're looking into the dugout to see a coach who's visibly upset with them at the age of 12 for making a bad throw, right? We have to expect that errors are going to happen, especially at the younger ages. And if we're going into practice doing punishment because of those errors at the game, or because we made an error at practice, why don't we work on the reasons we made the error, right? That makes more sense to me. If it's a ball in the hole to the forehand side and we couldn't get to the ball, it tips off the glove, and you say it's an error, why don't you work on footwork drills that's going to create a better environment that's going to say, hey, I can now get to the ball in the hole, or maybe work on anticipation of the ball in the hole, things like that, instead of saying, you owe me 10 burpees, right? Because that'll show you, right, as a coach, like that'll toughen them up to never make an error. They're going to hate you. That's really what's going to happen, is they're just going to hate you, and then they're going to leave the program. They're going to go to another program, and we're seeing that as players go from program to program to program to program. And the problem that starts to spiral with that is maybe a program is trying to teach something in terms of like a specific drill or specific skill. We don't spend enough time working on that skill or drill with that team that we actually develop it and get better at it, because we're just going to the next program. We're going to the next program, right? And as players, right, we need to work on the reasons why we're making those mistakes. And as coaches, we can't just say, hey, you guys made this error, you owe me, 40 burpees because everyone made an error, and then everyone's all upset at that one player, right? That would be like me in the gym. A player left their weights out, like maybe they left like 4 dumbbells out because they didn't realize it, and hey, you owe me, go in the cage over there and go take 40 ugly swings. You owe me 40 ugly swings, because we know at these practices, those burpees and push-ups and crunches, they don't look the best because they're just trying to get them over and done with as quick as they can, right? The goal is getting them as fast as they can and getting the exercises over and done with. So if you leave a weight out, coaches, how would you feel if I said, hey, I just made your player go do 50 ugly throws because they left the weight out, and they show up to practice with bad habits and their throwing mechanics are all off, and you're like, what did you just do? I mean, it's the same concept when they come to the gym and all of a sudden they can't do a push-up anymore, or they're struggling with their form on push-ups because at practice they just had to go do 50 of them for no reason besides making an error because they're young, and that's what happens when you're young, is you make mistakes, right? I'd rather work on those mistakes. I'd rather find that time. Like if we have an hour and a half at a field, I don't want to spend 30 minutes of that running or doing push-ups or doing burpees. Like I've seen players have to run to the pole and do that 10 times. And when they get to the pole, they've got to do 15 burpees. And then they go to the other pole and then they have to do 15 push-ups. And then they run to home plate and then they got to do 15 tuck jumps. And then because they scored 15 runs against them, they have to do that 15 times. And I mean, that's the sport is scoring runs, right? You can't have a player or you can't penalize a team for giving up a run, right? As a coach, like we need to make a change. As a coach, you need to look at yourself and be like, what are we doing to work on the skill of softball, to work on the game portion that's going to not allow those mistakes to happen as often, because they're going to happen, right? They're gonna happen. That's the point, is they're younger and they have to learn from those mistakes. But if they're playing in fear, if they're playing looking over their shoulder at you in the dugout making a spectacle because like, oh, they threw the ball away or the first baseman couldn't scoop the ball, well, go work on scoops, right? Go work on throwing mechanics that's going to make a stronger throw, right? There's so much stuff that you can do besides punishment, right? Because those players are going to resent you. And then as a player, like maybe if you're the one that's always making the error, your teammates are going to be brutal to you. You know you've made the error. You know you're the reason why everyone is doing all this punishment running. That's not fun. It's not a good environment to create for a player. You create divide amongst the players. You create divide amongst the parents. You create divide amongst the coaches to the players, right? We all have to get better at this. And as coaches, if you don't agree with me, if you think that like doing these burpees are really going to toughen them up and that'll show them and just have this whole let's make them tougher because we have to because they made errors, comment below and let's get a good conversation going, because I'd love to hear the reasons for why you think that it's good. And I'd love to give you the reasons why I feel it might not be as good. And then maybe let's get a good conversation so we can both learn from each other and maybe make the best environment for these players to get better at softball.